Chapter 3. Conflict and Combat. Upon returning from the sojourn at Yorgo Rift, Prime Delva Spirus claimed to have survived on a diet of blight orchids. Note: from the Medical Journal of the Navigators' Isolation Ward. The life of an explorer is often savage and harsh. In Coriolis, the Great Dark, you can run into Ship City thugs, strange critters, alien beings, and creatures of the dark. Combat can be dangerous for your player character, sometimes even lethal. Rounds and initiative. Combat is played out in rounds. When combat begins, the first step is to determine who has the initiative. Do this before anyone rolls dice for an action. Drawing initiative. Grab 10 cards, numbered 1 through 10. A suit of any normal deck of cards works fine if you remove the face cards and count the ace as 1. Custom initiative cards will be published for the full game. Each player taking part in the conflict, either voluntarily or involuntarily, draws a card, and the GM draws 1 card for each NPC or group. This is called drawing the initiative. The number on the card determines the order in which you act in the conflict. Participants act in order from lowest to highest number, beginning with card number 1 until everyone has taken their turn. Place your initiative card in front of you so everyone can see in which order you all act. The GM places their initiative card, S, in front of them. When all participants have had their turn, the round is over and a new round begins by drawing the initiative again. Surprise and initiative. If you initiate combat with an attack that the GM deems fully surprising, you get to choose any initiative you want instead of drawing a random card. All other combatants, including others on your side, draw initiative normally. At the start of the second round, everyone draws the initiative as usual. Exchanging initiative. During a fight, you can exchange your initiative card, and thus your initiative, with another explorer or NPC whose turn has not yet come up in the current round, if such a character exists. This must be declared on your turn before you perform any action. The other character cannot resist this exchange and must take their turn immediately. A character is not allowed to immediately exchange their initiative when just given a new one. Actions. On your turn in the round, you can move and perform 1 action. You simply explain what you want to do. Some actions will require you to roll dice to see if you succeed. An action in combat can be many different things. The list below summarizes the most typical actions. Reactions. Some actions are not performed on your turn, but on the opponent's. These are called reactions and include things like blocking or dodging close combat attacks. This uses up your own turn in the round, which means that you cannot perform a reaction if you have already had your turn and performed an action. Flip your initiative card after performing a reaction. Free actions. Things like dropping to the ground or shouting a few words are called free actions. They don't count as your action in the round, but you can only do them on your own turn. Draw a weapon, draw, exchange, or put away a weapon kept at hand. Change position. Throw yourself to the ground or get up. Drop equipment. Drop a piece of equipment to the ground. Shout. Say a few words or shout a warning. Zones and movement. In Coriolis, the Great Dark maps are often used to describe adventure locations where combat takes place. Maps are divided into zones. A zone is typically a room, a corridor, or an area of ground. How big a zone varies from a few steps across up to about 25 meters. A zone is generally smaller in a cramped environment than in open terrain. Zone features. Zones can have various features which affect actions performed within them. Cluttered. The zone is covered by dense undergrowth or filled with debris of some sort. You must roll for agility when you move into the zone. Failure means you manage to get into the zone, but you fall down. Dimly lit. The zone is dimly lit. Observation rolls in the zone are very difficult and get a -2 base dice modifier. Ranged attacks into the zone are equally difficult and can't pass through the zone. Cramped, a crawl space or narrow tunnel. In a cramped zone, you can only crawl, not run. You also cannot move or shoot past individuals next to you against targets behind them. Borders and line of sight. The border between two adjacent zones can be open or blocked by a wall. A blocked border can have a door or a hatch, as indicated by the map, allowing movement between the two zones. Open borders don't block vision or movement. A blocked border generally blocks line of sight, even if there is a door or hatch in it, unless you're standing by the doorway. Movement. Under normal circumstances, you can move from one zone to a neighboring zone or between short and engaged range from an enemy or explorer in the same zone you are already in. No roll is required to move unless it's into a cluttered zone. Range categories. The distance between you and your opponents is divided into 5 range categories. Engaged means right next to you. Short means a few meters away, in the same zone as you. Medium means up to 25 meters away, in an adjacent zone. Long means up to about 100 meters, or 4 zones, away. Extreme means up to about 1 kilometer. Run. By choosing to run as your action in the round, you can make 1 additional move as per above. Crawling. Moving while prone, i.e. crawling, counts as your action and movement in the round. In a cramped zone, crawling is the only movement possible. Stand or crouch. You can stand or crouch down as a free action, but you can only do this on your turn. Retreat. If you have an active enemy at engaged range and there is no barrier between you, you must make an agility roll to move away from your adversary. If you fail, you still move, but your enemy gets an immediate, free, close combat attack against you. The free attack occurs out of turn order, and it doesn't count toward their action in the round. You cannot block it. You can combine retreat with running, which uses your action as movement. Doors and hatches. You can open an unlocked door or hatch as part of your movement. A locked door or hatch can be broken down. A typical door or hatch can take 5 points of damage before it gives in. More sturdy doors require more force and also have an armor rating. Surprise attacks. Starting a combat encounter in a prepared and advantageous position can give the explorers the edge needed to come out victorious. Sneak attack. When you sneak up on someone undetectedly and perform an attack, it is called a sneak attack. First, you make an agility roll. Moving close enough to attack in melee combat or engaged range gives you a -2 modifier. If you fail, the enemy notices you. Draw initiative. If you succeed, your attack counts as surprising, which means that you can choose any initiative card you want. For a close combat sneak attack, you also get a +3 modifier, and the target cannot block or dodge the attack. Sneak attacks are always performed individually by one attacker against one target. Ambush. A special kind of sneak attack is an ambush, lying in wait for an enemy and attacking as it passes by. In this case, each victim makes a perception roll to spot the ambush, with a -2 modifier if the attackers are well prepared. All those who fail get the bottom cards, counting from number 10 and up, randomly drawn. Close combat. Close combat happens when you are in the same zone as your opponent and at engaged range. You use your strength with or without a weapon. If your roll succeeds, you hit your adversary and inflict your weapon's base damage rating on them. Each extra success will increase the damage by 1. To attack with a weapon, it must also be drawn. You can have up to 3 weapons at hand. To draw a weapon is a free action for a weapon at hand. Picking up another weapon from the ground or from your inventory costs a regular action. Prone targets. If you are prone, your close combat attacks get a -2 modifier. Getting up is a free action. Close combat attacks against a prone target get a +2 modifier. Blocking. When an enemy attacks you in close combat, you can roll for strength to block their attack and avoid being hit. This counts as your action this round. You must declare that you are attempting to block the attack before the attacker rolls for their strike. This effectively turns the attack into an opposed roll. Every success you roll eliminates 1 from the attacker's roll. Excess successes can be used for other effects, but not to deal damage. Blocking doesn't break the turn order. Blocking can only be performed if you have a close combat weapon, unless you have an appropriate talent for unarmed combat. Once you have blocked, your action in the round is spent, and you must flip your initiative card. Creature attacks cannot be blocked unless otherwise specified. Unarmed. If you are unarmed, you can only block unarmed attacks from other humanoids. To block an armed close combat attack or an attack by a creature of some type, you need to wield a weapon or tool. Dodging. As an alternative to blocking, you can try to dodge when hit by an attack. You cannot block and dodge the same attack. You must choose one or the other. You can dodge while prone. You must declare that you are attempting to dodge the attack before the attacker rolls for their strike. Roll for agility. On success, you dodge the attack and take no damage. On a failure, you are hit by the attack. Either way, you become prone after having dodged. Dodging is a reaction, and, like blocking, requires that you have not already performed your action in the round. Once you have dodged, your action in the round is spent, and you must flip your initiative card. On a successful dodge, you may, if you want, move up to 2 meters in any direction. This movement does not trigger free attacks from anyone and takes you out of engaged range. Creature attacks can be dodged unless otherwise specified. Extra success. If you have extra successes when attacking or blocking, you can use them for other effects. You can wrestle a handheld item from your opponent's grasp. You can keep the item or fling it into an adjacent zone as part of the attack. You can trip your opponent to the ground, or you can push your opponent to short range. Ranged combat. To attack someone with a ranged weapon, roll for agility, except for thrown weapons, which use strength. As in close combat, to draw a weapon at hand is a free action, while firing a weapon is an action. If your attack succeeds, you hit your target and inflict your weapon's base damage rating on them. Each extra success increases the damage by 1. Range. The weapons tables indicate the range of each weapon, i.e., the maximum range category at which the weapon can be used. The farther away your target is, the harder it is to hit. At medium range, you get a -1 modification, and at long range, you get -2. At engaged range, you get -3, because it's hard to draw a bead on an opponent that close. Aimed fire. If you take your time to aim carefully before squeezing the trigger, you get a +2 to your attack roll. Aiming counts as your action, and you can't shoot until the next round. If you do anything else, except shoot your weapon after you have aimed, or if you are hurt, you lose the effect of the aim. Full auto. A burst of auto fire counts as a normal ranged attack, but if you hit, you may immediately make another attack against the same target or a different one. If you hit again, you may make a third attack. Even if this also hits, you don't get more attacks. After all attacks are resolved, you must reload. Reload. Most firearms have large enough magazines for you not to need to worry about counting shots during a fight. If you have used your weapon, you need to reload when the fight is over. There are a few exceptions, notably full auto. Cover! Taking cover behind something in the same zone as you can be done as part of your movement. Cover has an armor rating and works just like armor. You have to take cover before getting shot at. Taking cover is not a reaction. Darkness. In complete darkness, you have no choice but to feel your way around. To run in complete darkness requires a successful agility roll, and you take 1 point of damage if you fail. You can still attack opponents at engaged range in darkness, but with a -2 modifier. At short range, you must roll for perception successfully, no action required, to be able to attack the target, also with a -2 modifier. You cannot hit targets at medium range or more in total darkness. Weapons. Using a weapon will greatly improve your effectiveness in combat. The features describing weapons are explained below. Grip indicates if you need 1 or 2 hands to wield the weapon. Bonus indicates the number of gear dice you get when using the weapon. Damage indicates your base damage rating, i.e., how many points of damage your opponent suffers if your attack is successful. If you roll extra 6s, you deal 1 additional damage per additional 6. Crit threshold. The crit threshold tells you how much damage you have to generate on your roll to inflict a critical injury on your opponent. Range indicates the maximum range category at which the weapon can be used. Features describes special features of the weapon. Damage. Life as an explorer is risky and dangerous. You can get harmed in many ways, such as damage, despair, or blight, which reduces your explorer's health, hope, and heart, respectively. Read about despair and blight later on. Suffering damage. You can suffer damage in many ways. These are the most common. Attacks. Whenever you attack someone in combat, you inflict damage equal to the base damage rating of the weapon, plus 1 additional point of damage for each extra success rolled beyond the first. Hazards. Your explorer can suffer damage from the environment, such as explosions, fire, etc. Armor. Body armor can protect you from damage. The effect of armor is determined by its armor rating, a numerical value. When you suffer damage from an attack, roll a number of gear dice equal to the armor rating. Every 6 you roll decreases the damage by 1. This roll does not count as an action and cannot be pushed. Broken by damage. When your health reaches 0, you are broken by damage. Being broken basically means you are taken out of action. When broken, you can crawl a short distance, but you can't perform any action rolls. Recovering from damage. Being broken is not fatal in itself. Only critical injuries can actually kill you. There are 2 ways to recover after being broken, assuming you're not dead. Getting help. Someone can help you recover by performing a first aid action and rolling for logic. This counts as an action. If the roll is successful, you immediately heal damage equal to the number of successes rolled. You can only apply first aid to broken victims. On your own, if no one is around to help you, you automatically heal 1 point of damage after 1 shift has passed. If you are not broken, you heal 1 point of damage per shift. This assumes that you are not broken by blight. You can recover health and hope at the same time. Critical injury. Normal damage points represent fatigue, bruises, and flesh wounds. Painful, to be sure, but not fatal. Critical injuries represent much more dangerous forms of injury. These can maim or kill you. When making an attack, you trigger a critical injury if the The damage, after any reductions for armor and cover, equals or exceeds the crit threshold of the weapon. When you inflict a critical injury on an enemy, roll d66 on the tables below to see which critical injury you inflict. Note that a critical injury won't necessarily cause someone to be broken. Conditions. In Coriolis, the Great Dark critical injuries, mental critical injuries, and Blight manifestations can lead to conditions. Each condition gives you a -2 dice on all rolls for a specific attribute. Exhausted, strength. Dazed, agility. Confused, logic. Distracted, perception. Shaken, insight. Disheartened, empathy. You can suffer conditions in other ways as well, as an example due to creature attacks or specific events. If you suffer a condition that you already have, you must choose another condition. If you already have all conditions, you take 2 damage when you would suffer a condition. You can heal 1 condition by resting 1 shift. Other critical injury effects are healed according to the critical injury table. Death. Physical critical injuries can be lethal. If you suffer such an injury, you must make a death save when the listed time limit has passed. 1 round, stretch, or shift. If the time limit is round, make the roll on your next turn. The death save is not an action in itself. A death save is a roll for strength. If a death save fails, you die. If you succeed, you linger on, but you must make another death save when the listed amount of time has passed again. Stabilizing critical injuries. To stabilize a lethal critical injury and save your life, 1 or more first aid actions with logic rolls must be made. Medical equipment can give positive modifiers to the roll. The first aid action with logic takes the same amount of time to perform as the time limit of your critical injury. If the roll succeeds, the time limit of your critical injury is increased by 1 category, e.g., from round to stretch. When a critical injury with a time limit of a shift is successfully treated, you no longer risk dying and you don't need to make any further death saves. If the first aid action with logic roll fails, another try is allowed, but only after another death save has been made. Broken and critical injuries. If you are both broken and have sustained a lethal critical injury, 2 separate first aid action rolls with logic are needed. 1 to get you back on your feet, and another one to save your life. These 2 rolls can be made in whichever order you prefer. Instant kill. Note that some critical injuries will kill you outright. If you gain any of these, your character dies immediately. No death save is allowed. Crit effects. Each critical injury has a specific effect that you suffer during the healing time indicated, which is measured in days. NPCs and crits. Critical injuries are handled in a different manner for some NPCs. If an attack against a minor NPC reaches the crit threshold, the NPC is killed or taken out of action. The GM decides the details. Hope and despair. Frightful or horrific experiences, or just losing hope, can temporarily put you out of action or even cause long-term mental trauma. Hope is reduced by despair, just like damage reduces your health. Suffering despair. You can suffer despair in many ways. These are the most common. How pushing rolls can inflict despair is described earlier. Horror. Some critters and creatures can attack by their horrific visage. Whenever you are attacked by someone in these ways, you suffer despair equal to the base rating of the attack, plus 1 additional point of despair for each extra success rolled beyond the first. You then make an insight roll, not an action. Each 6 rolled eliminates 1 point of potential despair. You can push the roll but at the risk of suffering even more despair if you get anyone's on the re-roll. Stressful situations. When your explorer is subjected to fear or a stressful situation, the GM determines the potential despair inflicted. You then make an insight roll, not an action. Each success rolled eliminates 1 point of potential despair. You can push the roll, but at the risk of suffering even more despair if you get anyone's on the re-roll. In the adventure, The Sky Machine, situations that are stressful are specified. Broken by despair. When your hope reaches 0, you are broken by despair and suffer a critical mental injury. Immediately roll on the mental injury table. When broken by mental damage, you can't perform any action rolls. The effect lasts until you have recovered, as per the healing time indicated in the table. Any further despair, while already broken, has no effect. Recovering hope. There are 2 ways to recover after being broken from despair, assuming you're not dead. A helping hand. Someone can help you by talking to you and rolling for empathy. This counts as an action. If the roll is successful, you immediately recover hope equal to the number of 6s rolled. You can only help broken victims in this way, on your own. If no one is around to help you, you automatically recover 1 point of hope after 1 shift has passed. If you are not broken, you recover 1 point of hope per shift. This assumes that you are not broken by Blight. You can recover health and hope at the same time. Social conflict. All conflicts are not combat. Sometimes you can make things go your way without resorting to violence. Instead, you trick or convince your opponents without drawing your weapon. For this, you use the empathy attribute. If your opponent is actively trying to resist you, it's an opposed roll against their empathy. If not, it's a straight roll. Some talents may add a bonus in certain situations. Before you roll, you must state the stakes of the roll, what you want to achieve. What you ask of your opponent must be within reason. No NPC will agree to outrageous requests or act directly against their own interests, no matter how good your roll is. Conversely, you don't need to roll for simple requests that your opponent has no reason to resist. The GM has the final say on when social conflict rolls can or need to be used. Some talents can be used to give despair to an adversary in social conflicts. Social conflict. Generally, you only engage in social conflict with NPCs, not explorers. When NPCs or other explorers try to talk you into something, it's up to you how you react. Interrogation. When you interrogate a captive to gain information, roll against their empathy or strength depending on how you interrogate them. You get a +2 modifier to your roll for your opponent, being held captive. As opposed to normal social conflict rolls, interrogation can be used against explorers, actually forcing you to disclose information whether you as a player want to or not. Social conflict. With a group, when you want to persuade a whole group, you usually address the group's leader or spokesperson. Negotiating position. Your chances in a social conflict are affected by your negotiating position. Each of the following factors gives you a +1 modifier to the roll. Your request doesn't cost your opponent anything. Your opponent has suffered damage, despair, or blight. Your opponent is in custody or held captive by you. You have helped your opponent previously. You present your case very well, determined by the GM. Each of the following factors gives you a -1 modifier to the roll. Your opponent must take a serious risk or make a sacrifice to help you. Your opponent has nothing to gain by helping you. You are held captive by your opponent. You are having trouble hearing or understanding each other. Hazards. There are more ways than one to get hurt in Coriolis, the Great Dark. Fire. When exposed to fire, roll a number of dice based on its intensity, typically ranging from 3 to 9. Effect. For every 6 rolled for the fire, you suffer 1 point of damage. If you take damage, you catch fire and continue to burn. When burning, you suffer another attack each round on your turn. The intensity increases by 1 step each round. As soon as a fire attack inflicts no damage, the fire goes out by itself. You or a friend at engaged range can put out the fire with a successful agility roll, regular action. Using a blanket or similar object gives a +2 modifier. Crits. Fire doesn't cause normal critical injuries. Instead, if you are broken by fire damage or suffer fire damage when already broken, you must make a death save on your turn every round until you die, or you are saved by a first aid action by rolling for logic. Explosions. The force of an explosion is measured by its blast power. For each person within short range of the blast, i.e., in the same zone, roll for the blast power. See the adjacent table, which also indicates the base damage rating of the explosion. The roll cannot be pushed. Effect: if 1 or more successes are rolled, the target is hit by the blast and suffers the base damage. The damage done is increased by 1 for each additional 6 rolled beyond the first. Victims that engaged range from the detonation suffer 1 extra point of damage, a minimum of 1 point. Effect radius. Powerful charges can harm victims even at medium range, i.e., adjacent zones. If nothing blocks the blast power is then reduced by 6. Falling. Falling on a hard surface automatically inflicts an amount of damage to you equal to the height of the fall, in meters, divided by 2, rounding all fractions down. In a controlled jump, roll agility, each success rolled reduces the damage done by 1. Heart and Blight. Delving is not something for the unprepared or weak of mind explorer. Blight will reduce your heart. You can get exposed to the Blight in many situations. On a delve, when performing assignments during the voyage through the slipstream, or even when attacked by the aberrations of the Great Dark. Suffering Blight. When you are exposed to the Blight, your heart decreases as Blight accumulates in your body. Check off the boxes for heart on your character sheet. You can accumulate Blight in these ways. Delving. When passing through Blight-infested areas, including events, the Blight protection of the explorer's suit can protect against the Blight. Creatures. Specific creatures have attacks that inflict Blight. Certain locations. When your explorer enters certain areas or locations in a delve, they may get exposed to the Blight. This is described at the location. If you wear the appropriate protective suit, you can decrease the amount of Blight you suffer. Roll a number of gear dice equal to the Blight protection and decrease the Blight suffered for every 6 you get. The Blight level. A location's Blight level determines how much Blight the explorers are exposed to. The Blight level goes from 0 to 3. Broken by Blight. When your heart reaches 0, you are broken by Blight. Being broken by Blight is similar to being broken by despair, and you might even risk deadly Blight manifestations. When broken, you can't perform any action rolls. Recovering from Blight. Being broken from Blight is not fatal in itself. Only Blight manifestations can actually kill you. There are 2 ways to recover after being broken, assuming you're not dead. Getting help. Someone can help you recover from Blight by sanitizing you and rolling for logic, adding any applicable bonus from equipment. This counts as an action. If the roll is successful, you immediately recover heart equal to the number of 6s rolled. You can only sanitize broken victims on your own. If no one is around to help you, you automatically recover 1 point of heart after 1 shift has passed, if you are in a Blight-free area or in a base camp or forward camp. If you are not broken, You recover 1 point of heart per shift. This assumes that you are in a blight-free area. Blight cores. Some locations have high levels of blight. These so-called blight cores are usually specific locations or ancient machinery. As long as you remain inside or close to a blight core, you cannot recover health, hope, or heart in any way. You also take 1 point of blight per stretch in the blight core. Blight manifestation. You suffer a blight manifestation when your heart is reduced to 0. When you suffer a blight manifestation, roll on the blight manifestation table. Certain creatures or locations can also inflict blight manifestations. When an enemy inflicts a blight manifestation, roll D66 on the blight manifestation table. Note that a blight manifestation won't necessarily cause you to be broken. If you are broken by blight, you need to leave the blight-infested area as soon as possible. New blight leads to damage instead, which can kill you. Manifestation effects. Each blight manifestation has a specific effect that you suffered during the healing time indicated, which is measured in days, if not specified otherwise. Crits. Blight doesn't cause normal critical injuries. Instead, if you are broken by blight damage or suffer blight damage when already broken, you must make a death save on your turn every round until you die, or you are saved by a first aid action by rolling for logic. Creatures and adversaries. The Lost Horizon and the Great Dark Beyond is a perilous realm. The explorers will encounter both the local denizens of Jamua and the far colonies, but also hideous creatures of the ruined depths or vast darkness. Adversaries are NPCs that can interact and attack the explorers. Creatures are beasts, constructs, and critters of different origin. They are controlled by the GM and act largely in the same way as player characters and non-player characters in combat, but there are some differences, which are described below. Ferocity. Some creatures are so powerful that they can act multiple times in the same round. This is indicated by their ferocity score. At the start of each round, the GM draws 1 initiative card for each point of ferocity. The creature gets 1 action per initiative card. Creatures themselves never wait, but explorers can switch initiative with one of the creature's initiative cards. Creature attacks. A creature always uses a creature attack when it attacks. Each creature has a unique set of creature attacks, which are summarized in a table. The GM rolls or chooses an attack from this table when it is the creature's turn to attack. Performing a creature attack counts as an action. Unless otherwise specified, creature attacks are close combat attacks and happen at the engaged range. Avoiding creature attacks. As a rule, a creature attack cannot be blocked but dodged. Exceptions to this rule are stated in the creature attack description. Repeated attacks. A creature never makes the same attack twice in a row. If the GM rolls the same creature attack 2 consecutive times, the second roll changes into the next attack on the table. The 6th result becomes a 1. Abilities. Creatures can have abilities, i.e. as explorers and adversaries have talents, but they are mainly used outside of combat or for opposed roles, not for attacks. They only attack using their creature attacks. Armor. Many creatures have some form of natural armor. This works just like ordinary armor. Fear and social conflict. Creatures are too terrifying to get scared themselves, but many of them can certainly instill terror in the explorers. Creatures are also immune to social conflict unless otherwise stated. Adversaries. The GM has a lot of tools at their command, controlling phenomena such as brittle storms and creatures, but the most important devices in the story are the non-player characters that antagonize the explorers, adversaries. They can be used to create tension and drama, especially if the explorers have a personal relationship with the adversary. All adversaries have a description, attributes, talents, and equipment. If an attribute isn't listed, it is assumed to be 3. Talents are listed when applicable. Combat talents are added to the bonus in the weapon statistics of adversaries. Adversaries have a behavior describing what they are up to when the explorers encounter them. It's up to the GM to decide if there is any other common equipment the adversary should possess.